Good day, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. We're going to get started now as people are still popping in. Thank you for joining us. This very important and very relevant topic today. I'm Chip St. Clair, Vice President of Marketing for Tyson Group, and I'll be moderating the webinar today. A couple of housekeeping items before we get rolling. First, all registrants will receive a recording of this webinar in the next couple of days. Secondly, we're keeping this webinar short and sweet at 45 minutes, and we're going to reserve the last 10 minutes or so for Q&A. So please put any questions you might have in the Q&A section on your screen, and I'll be sure to field them for Lance. And lastly, if you remain until the end of the webinar, we'll have some action steps you can take to supercharge your sales team. So today, we're going to be talking about AI, more specifically, the human side of AI as it relates to sales. Because in case you haven't noticed, AI is more than just a buzzword. It's here to fundamentally transform the way we do business. Lance recently wrote an article for Fast Company that will be coming out within the next week or so entitled, "Don't Be Blockbuster." We all remember the video store franchise that failed to see the writing on the wall when technology suddenly usurped the entire business model. AI is much like that, but embracing it effectively is going to take guidance, leadership, and skillful navigation, because there's a human side that can easily be overlooked. So to help us on our journey to embrace AI is best-selling author, Forbes and Fast Company contributor, and president and CEO of Tyson Group, Lance Tyson.
Thanks, Chip. I appreciate the intro. I was wondering at first who you were talking about, so everything sounded great there. I appreciate everybody being here today and taking your time. And for people who aren't our customers and decided to get involved with this webinar, a little bit about Tyson Group. We're a pretty young company. We've only been around since 2018, and we're in the business of driving sales performance, and that's either through strategy, leadership solutions, or skill development of organizations we do business with. And since 2018, we are really driven by results and outcomes. And one of the things we definitely do is we have an internal value that says we eat our own dog food. So one of the things we're most excited about is we just got Inc. 5000 as one of the fastest growing companies in the US. And these are a lot of other endorsements in the training industry and consulting industry. And it's a little bit about us. And we really believe in data, people, and results. We also spend a lot of time writing. So some of the points that we're going to make today are going to come out of what we call the human sales factor, and we'll tie that into this big world of AI. As we were researching this concept, and we start to look out at how popular this concept was, but then how many questions. I was actually listening to a podcast, and I'm not by any means endorsing a certain podcast over one. I have my own podcast, but I was listening to Joe Rogan, and Joe was interviewing Sam Altman, the founder of ChatGPT, and this just happened kind of mid-April. But here was what was really unique about this podcast. It actually, as I was listening to the disclaimer, it really wasn't Joe Rogan, and it really wasn't Sam Altman. The entire conversation was actually between an AI language model. Excuse me, oops, let me go back, I apologize. And it was the use of AI, and so the goal of the podcast was the use of AI for exploration of capabilities only. Like, what can we do with this whole thing? And viewers were encouraged to look at this with a very discerning eye, meaning don't go post this on TikTok, because it really wasn't them talking. And I sat there and listened to it, and I have a person internally said, well, I don't think AI, I think you could tell the difference. And this was before I listened to the podcast, and I sent it over to him last night. He's Larry on my staff. I said, Larry, you can't tell the difference. And if you think back to 2 years ago, I think there was an update of Eminem's song Slim Shady, where an AI model did it for today. It was hard to tell a difference there. But so as I listened to the podcast, I was able to kind of pull some things out. I was like, I wonder what AI Sam would tell AI Joe, and how can we pull that into this vast sales world? Find out a couple things that I thought were interesting. So as they dove deeper, Sam went on to say that AI is not real, and I'm probably going to say this with less technical expertise than somebody else. AI is never going to be a great programmer or code effectively. You're always going to need programmers, and because AI is learning from the text a lot, at least ChatGPT is learning from the same text or the same sources over and over. So it doesn't create with originality. So there's always going to have to be, per se, that mathematician behind it thinking through it. But as we did our research, and you're going to see today, I think it's really hard unless you have a human conductor, a decision maker, a leader, a captain at the bridge, to discern all these things that are going on, how to use it in our companies, right? I think the other thing, what AI can do, and he kind of alluded to it in the podcast. He said, AI would be a really good triage. So if it was conducting like gathering information into sales or service information for inquiries, that would be really great. He went on to say, though, from a business perspective, AI can be a great tutor or coach, right? Now, that's not necessarily training, that's coaching somebody individually. And it's really good at generating talking points. And being a writer, it's, sometimes you just need some things to stimulate talking points. And we know that when we're sending emails out and different marketing material, even our social media team is looking at different AI to help with that. So the use is vast. Then we started to think about our customers, and I'm asked a lot of times by our customers how to use AI. And so we have trainers today in Kansas City working with a baseball team out there with the Royals. We have somebody down in Atlanta working with the Falcons. And we were talking about this morning with one of our trainers, Sheila. She goes, I got this question about AI. So about 2 weeks ago, interesting enough, I was with a sports venture, and about 60% of our business is in sports entertainment and the surrounding industries. And, things like selling naming rights and high-end tickets and media rights and things like that. And I was with a group about 2 weeks ago, and I asked this question. One of the questions we always ask in a training or consulting event is, what are your brutal truths? And one of the things I asked the group was, there are some sales leaders in the room, what's your brutal truth as it relates to sales? And then AI became a topic. So I said, so how many in the group here are using, and we had about 20 salespeople in the room. I said, how many people are using AI specifically for your own sales? And somebody said, what do you mean? I said, well, to create talking points, maybe questions and things like that, maybe to come up with a value proposition or impact statement. And the leader snapped back at me. And now this group's pretty big because they're involved in some ventures in the NBA, MLS, Major League Soccer, and the Shield, the NFL. And the leader snapped back at me and said, we've been instructed not to use AI from a sales perspective. And I asked probably the question that's not the greatest question. I snapped back and said, why? And he said, well, legal thinks there's too much risk with copyright and things like that. I said, so what you're saying is you're not encouraging your salespeople to use AI in pitches and things like that to help customize. And he said, no, we're strongly against it. And then I said, can I ask a question off the record? And he said, yeah. I said, well, how many of you salespeople are using AI? And about half the room timidly put their hands up. And I said, it's off the record. You can't be mad at them. So there's so many conflicting issues between ethics and brutal truths, who's using it and what. And why? And I guess where I am is I don't think there's a playbook out there. And I especially for sales teams and sales individuals, I think people are rogue with it. And us as conductors or captains of our ship or the director of our film, I think we need to really come up with a playbook or a script or how we're going to use it. And so that kind of brought us to this conversation. So if you think about sales very simplistically, okay, you're looking at the sales funnel. Okay. Now there's probably a lot of different types of sales organizations and salespeople. This is, let's call it a semi-complex, complex sales process, but in a very linear fashion. We all know this probably spins upward and downward. It's not linear. We're asked to, as we analyze situations and we go into different size teams, whether it be an enterprise team or a mid-market team, a lot of salespeople are asked to prospect. They're then asked to have some kind of initial communication with the target or an ideal prospect profile. At some level, they'll probably interview, do some kind of needs analysis, develop a solution, then present the solution. The customer will evaluate. There will be objection, and some level of negotiation will happen before there's a close. Now, if you could take this and apply this to your situation, and you'd say, okay, where would I use AI in this funnel? Well, you could probably get off of this plot or this webinar and ask AI where you could use it. So let's pick a couple spots. Well, we know salespeople are using it with prospecting. It's tied to CRM and things like that. Or somebody has just an open or ChatGPT app on their phone and they could ask questions. Well, we know it's also happening in some kind of initial communication. But then therein lies the problem. If you have a salesperson that is not that good and can't execute that well, or a sales leader that's not thinking about it, we're losing a little bit of control. We're losing some of the messaging. And ultimately, I want you to think about this. We as sales professionals have to execute what this text could bring to light if we're just talking about ChatGPT. Now, in prospecting your CRM, we're seeing a lot in the CRM we use where you can have AI do analysis on customer behaviors and prospect behaviors, but then somebody has to make a decision with that information. So if you looked at this as a basic frame and you said to yourself, okay, what am I missing with AI? Because it's here to stay. I mean, you go back to when the web came out and people started doing search and stuff. It's here to stay. Don't be the last of the buggy whip salespeople. I mean, this is here, so it's a tool at our disposal. But how do we put some strategy and design around it? So as we got in a conversation about this topic, we said, okay, when we approach a situation with any sales team, we look at it in a concept called sales team science. So here's how I'm going to frame a lot of your jobs on this webinar. So if you looked at most of your jobs here, now you could have some salespeople on this, or we could have a lot of sales leaders on this program. When we go in to do a diagnostic or we approach a situation, we actually believe, and I mentioned this before, that most of our customers and prospects suffer from the disease of uniqueness. Meaning they have a very unique scenario, they need unique solutions, they need unique consulting because their marketplace, their customers are where they are as a business, and they got to align they got to get productivity and alignment of the sales organization. So as we look at AI and what's the human side of this, well, you got on here and said, hey, maybe we can improve sales enablement, but sales enablement is tied to all these things. So if you look at the top of this string, sales leadership, sales effectiveness, talent, that actually deals with the people side of the business. Let's say that's the crew. At the bottom, you have more process or hard skills. So management is KPIs and planning and organizing, directing, coordinating, controlling. The sales process is a predictable, scalable way you approach your business. I showed you a sales process in the slide before, reflective in that funnel. Then sales methodology is, what's your philosophy on selling? Is it value-based selling? Is it strategic selling? Is it consultative selling? Talent, you all know there's a war for talent out there, and it's getting the right person on the bus, which is very cliche, or identifying somebody that has upside. And then enablement's the technology. So if you think about AI inside this frame, how could it work? And our goal today is to give you some suggestions on how to make this work. Now, I do want to go a step further. We built this model off of common issues that we see in every single industry, in every single sales team we deal with, big, as large as an enterprise account, or one of our where you could have 300 to 400 salespeople, maybe a mid-sized organization where they have 100 to 250 salespeople, or organizations that have under 100. And inside this, you have different forms of selling. You have account management. You have people that are service to salespeople. You have direct account executives, right? You have large account salespeople, people that focus on certain products or territories. So it really wouldn't matter. But we know there's 3 issues every single time. So when we get in to and get in with a leader, we know that these three things are going to come up at some level. So we built sales team science based off of this, and then we'll show you how AI affects these things. So we see there's three critical factors in selling. I think number one is some level of sales productivity. And when you look at sales productivity, okay, you could break that down to the individual, to a team you're managing, right? Or the productivity of the whole organization. So organizations measure productivity all kinds of different ways. It could be in simply setting first appointments. I know in our organization, Gina Beltrama, who's our VP, she's doing an extremely good job. And Brandon, who works with her, tracking, he's our senior director, tracking first meetings. But one of the things they also track is what we call pitch through rate. And this is something we suggest to our clients, measuring how often, because we have a multi-step sales process, often somebody get to step one to step two. So that would be productivity. So you could have dials, you could have appointments, you could have movement. But then there's another piece in most sales, right? And even in simple selling, meaning like a sales process is not complex. Maybe it's one interaction with somebody. I was talking to somebody recently who sold me a Peloton. That's a very simplistic sales process, but they have to go through multiple stages in order to get somebody to buy a Peloton. You know, like we say often, that's a $2,000 product. It requires a $2,000 presentation, right? So like anything else, a $50,000 product requires a $50,000 presentation. But then as you start to look at sales productivity, you got to also take into account the cost of sales. And typically the highest cost in sales is the amount of time it takes to get step one to step two, or the amount of resources that go into a sale. How many people have to be brought on? How many people have to brought in to help make a sale? But typically when we look at sales cycle time, we're actually looking at the amount of time it takes from inception, that's generating the lead, converting the lead, and then moving it through the sales process. And then gaining ultimately higher close rates. That's the last critical factor. Well, close rates can mean a lot of things. It could be closing on appointments. It could be closing for next steps. It could be closing to do more due diligence, whatever that is, however you measure, ultimately just closing the sale. Now, so what we first did is, as we were thinking about this frame and then these critical outcomes that most of our customers need and most salespeople need, we say, all right, how can AI affect these critical factors? Well, if we looked at sales, increasing sales productivity, AI can definitely drive insights with sales data to identify patterns and trends and different opportunities, right? So maybe it causes the salesperson to sort through information and then prioritize, for instance, with leads, like this says. Ultimately, though, you know, making a decision on these things is going to require good management, good KPIs and stuff like that. Well, you could get something as simple as automated task management. I know a lot of salespeople that are hired are really good at some things. Sometimes getting stuff in the CRM or certain task management, maybe they're just better at hunting, but it's the little stuff, the data entry that affects how we measure things. That might be important. Follow-up activities and things like that, organizational skills, you can get as menial as that. So there's two things right there that you can help with increasing productivity. Obviously, these things tie into enablement, but you have to have good structure around sales management and sales leadership to know that these would even be issues. Well, if we went to reducing sales cycle time, well, AI can definitely drive, and this is their CRM, can predict what leads would convert more effectively, allowing sales teams to sort through productive action, right, or priority action. You know, sometimes salespeople do a lot of busy work versus spending time with people who could buy. So that could help shorten sales cycle time. You could optimize sales process by having AI look at historical data and identifying where those bottlenecks are. Now, that would really depend on how good of information you had in the CRM, right? You could look at gaining higher close rates by personalizing or analyzing customer behavior and making personalized product recommendations to content, more specifically to the buyer. We can't argue this fact. There is something called the app effect out there. If you think about how people buy now, you buy on Amazon or any app you have downloaded on your phone, right? There's a personalization that people do like when they're being pitched. AI can provide real-time coaching during a sales call, right? If you move into sales team science, and we frame this out, there are 7 factors in sales team science that we want to get alignment to. If you just looked at sales leadership and sales management, so you say sales leadership's the communication, the culture, the behavior, the values, right? That's the people side. Sales management is the planning, the organizing, the directing, the coordinating, controlling, right? You could look at performance insights to your sales team that could identify strengths and weaknesses of each team member or as a group. That helps with development plans. You could use AI for coaching support to assist sales managers in giving data-driven suggestions to help improve an individual or overall team performance. But once again, if you go back to that picture that was embedded in one of the first slides, that orchestra leader, you need somebody to be able to pull this off. If we go down to the next piece, right, where you start looking at sales process and methodology, right? So sales process, I gave you that structure in the funnel. And, how many steps is your sales process? I would say to all of you on here, do you have a predictable, scalable process? Predictable process yields predictable result. Well, AI could analyze the effectiveness of different sales processes and methodologies and suggest adjustments to your current, but it would be based off of current data because it is very data-driven analysis, but there's nuances of creativity and stuff that might not be as built into there, right? You could take it you could use AI to help you adapt situationally. Florida State did a study a few years ago to challenge the Challenger model. If you ever read the book, The Challenger Sale, it's an excellent book. And they came up with a concept that more of like a read offense to sales, that when they studied high performers in multiple organizations, and I think it was over 100 different organizations, over 300 salespeople. You go to our website and see the study. A professor named Lef Bonney at Florida State put that together. And what he found is that high performers had a style based off the situation that they were approaching. And I think he said the only accurate way you could define a top selling rep or a high performing salesperson is that they were situational and they were able, in any situation, they were able to adapt their process. So we could use AI to help us by looking at prospect behavior, by looking at customer behavior, and look at the likelihood or risk of successful interactions, right? Now, a lot of you on here may actually be doing this currently, right? You may be doing this through your coaching and your sales meetings. We were just with an organization a few weeks ago where we were, our group does a lot, we do a lot of training, but we also do a lot of post-mortems and pre-ops. And we were down with the Dallas Cowboys and we were working with one of their groups doing pre-ops, meaning they had meetings coming up and we were literally looking at the likelihood of success in different situations based off experience, based off of how their salespeople have reacted in the past, right? So there's different ways you could use AI for that. By the way, methodology, think about this, the difference between methodology and process. Methodology is the methods you use in different parts of the interaction, right? Where you'll get things, for instance, like a relationship seller, strategic selling, or consultative selling. These are words that vendors like and authors like me will use to describe something, but you may have a very hybrid model needed in your businesses, and AI could help give insight. And I think what we're getting at here is if you think about AI, right, as kind of sheet music and the words, how do we then make it sing? How do we make the music actually happen? I think that's the challenge for most of us here. Let's look at a couple other things in sales team science. A lot of you came here because maybe sales enablement. We have been talking about enablement the whole time, but if we wanted to really call down on sales enablement, AI is used right now all the time for content personalization. You can personalize sales content based off the prospect profile you're dealing with or an engagement history. And so thus delivering more relevant materials. Now, I would tell you also, you could even use that to develop an agenda or a questioning process flow. But once again, anybody can be handed a script. It doesn't mean you can act, right? You can be handed sheet music. Doesn't mean you can sing, right? So that's where the conductor comes in. That's where the movie producer, that's where the director comes in, right? And that's the onus is on sales leadership. So if you're actually really thinking through this, there's a lot of pressure on sales leadership to come up with the right playbook for your situation. AI is not the solution. It's a potential tool, right? Sales tool integration, AI can integrate with sales enablement tools, providing real-time insights. Our SVP, Moni Gerbini, and a member of our staff, Larry, who was talking about earlier, they're looking at our CRM and how we can integrate a lot of this into just our CRM and how we interact and how that ties into our marketing and things like that. Last two concepts before, as we start to bring this down for landing, and think of some questions, because you have us here. Maybe we can get very situational with your question. Maybe we can, and if you do have questions that you want to bring offline, we have a call to action that you might want to take advantage of that might help. Sales effectiveness. Think of sales effectiveness more as the skills and competencies that we need our salespeople, our account managers, or service people, even some of our managers, to be more effective at. So if you're looking at performance analytics, we can look at real-time metrics to provide actionable insights to improve strategies and tactics. Remember, strategies win war, tactics win battles. Continuous improvement. AI can look at where a sales team may need traditional training or support. I have a customer that is looking at AI right now to help with very complex product knowledge issues. And it can help, going back to what Sam said earlier in Joe Rogan's podcast, it can be used as a tutor or mentor, right? That doesn't mean it's a trainer. That doesn't mean it's a coach, but it can help with that stuff. So it's adjunct, it really adds on to, it doesn't replace what's existing. It has to tie into that. And I think the last few things is we do a lot of assessments. It's a big part of what we do. So we assess incoming talent, and we also assess talent, do a lot of talent audits on what's existing. We know that AI is going to revolutionize that piece. And you can look at matching a desired profile, streamlining the hiring process, or with what we would call learning paths, right? You can personalize training programs for individuals or the group, and this would help out with a lot of that, enhance overall competencies. So a couple things before I bring this down for a landing, and I really appreciate everybody's time here today. I would say sales isn't about moving product or service, it's about moving people. And ultimately, how is AI going to move our people to be more successful? How is it going to give them more at-bats or make them successful? We spent a lot of time a few years ago, or in the last year, putting this book together called The Human Sales Factor. And it's become a very strong leadership program, and actually pitching ideas and things like that for salespeople. There's a blend of both, and the book's really about selling ideas. I'm not here to sell you a book. You can go get it on Amazon. You can listen to it. It's on Audible. It's about persuasion and influence. And by the way, they are two very significantly different things. Influence is one of those things where people probably said to you, so-and-so's a bad influence on you, and persuasion is more by winning by argument or process. What's our EQ? And how good are we at leadership and storytelling? And these things are all going to be built into how we make AI affect with an A, our sales teams more positively, and how to get a better effect with an E. And we're going to go into Q&A, and I'm going to end with this first. There was a gentleman named Russell Conwell, and he's still around telling the story. He'd made a bunch of trips into the Middle East and Africa, and as the story goes, he told a story about this African farmer, and this farmer had owned a lot of land, and people would come past this farm, and there was a diamond rush going on in Africa at the time, and he would see these other farmers were selling their land and leaving their property, and he was convinced that he was going to actually go and stake his claim and go find diamonds, a diamond mine also. And he sold his farm and started to travel. For 20 years, he just traveled to no avail, no success. He couldn't find a diamond mine. So frustrating. In fact, he lost his family, lost his fortune. He threw himself into a river and ended it. As the story goes, though, the person who actually bought his farm a few years later was in a stream outside the farm he had bought, and he found a diamond. And as many of you know, some diamonds are yellow, and I think that's kind of the purest form or the most raw form. And he put it up on his mantle, and a friend came by and said, "What is this?" And he goes, "Oh, this is just like a crystal I found in the creek." And he goes, No, this is actually a diamond." And it turned out that as they explored the stream, that the property that I bought had acres of diamonds. It was the biggest diamond find on the African continent. What I would tell you is we have a lot of diamonds in our people, and the way we're doing business, I would say AI would help us mine that a little bit better. So I'm going to open this up to some questions. I appreciate your time today. So if you can, Chip, do you have some questions? Or or some questions that are typically asked?
Yeah, one of the questions we get a lot are, because we have time with the author of The Human Sales Factor. What are some of the human sales factors that you feel will be irreplaceable by AI?
I would say that the risk is allowing AI to take over the coaching, as opposed to you really being in touch with your people and what they need and talking to them and driving that two-way conversation and really them being involved. Because I would say you can analyze all you want, but if you don't get buy-in from the people, I think that's critical. And the other question we're getting asked a lot in front of customers is kind of, where do I start? And if you, in our consulting business, as we do gap analysis, I would start with AI, not as an overarching theme. I would start with AI where you were the weakest. I could tell you, for our business, really qualifying leads and really sorting through that, the front end of our process is the most expensive part of our process and most time consuming. And that's kind of where we've started to attack and really plug that in. And we're a good sales organization too. I mean, we don't make 5,000 without being a good sales organization, but we have weaknesses ourselves, and we're also going to apply it in some of our hiring practices. That's where we're going to start to really kind of really push that. And with everybody's time, and Chip, I don't know if you have any other questions, and before we go to close this out.
I'm fielding more questions. In terms of sales team science, one of the interesting things I think you brought up was the fact that sales enablement is what people typically think of when they think of the impact of AI. Well, where this goes well beyond it. I think one of the things that I thought in our research was pretty compelling was that the sales effectiveness tools, the capabilities that AI can help with, but trying to balance that, I thought maybe you could expand on that a little.
Yeah, I think from a sales effectiveness, standpoint, in sales, we're a training company that consults. So a lot of times our primary mission is skill development, either through leadership or the salespeople in and of itself. I think if you thought about a face of a clock, for behavior change, 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock would be awareness and attitude. And then from 3 o'clock to 6, people seek knowledge. And then from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, they want some kind of coaching, right? And then when they get coaching with practice, and then when practice with coaching, then they start developing skills, habits, and behavior. I think an AI around effectiveness can help people see their blind spots. It's like cognitive dissonance, right? Like when you're moving from one lane to the other, you have a blind spot, and sometimes people lay in the horn because you didn't even see them. They're so close to your bumper. I think that's where AI can definitely help identify cognitive dissonance to get people to buy in.
Excellent. No, I think that's a fantastic point. I'm not seeing any other questions coming right now. We can move on to the
Yeah.
call to action.
Here, I
Oh,
would
I'm
say,
sorry. Actually, someone did just put in a question. Is it safe to assume that AI speeds up the process, but ultimately it's the human interaction that closes the deal?
yes, and I would say who answered that question, it does speed up the process, but remember, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So sometimes speed's not better. Sometimes smoothness is. So I think it could smooth the process, and you don't want it to speed up too much. So that's a great question. Our offer to anybody that was on this or anybody that's going to listen to this on the recording is real simple. You might have a specific issue, a specific opportunity that you want to talk about. I'm saying one of our people will talk, one of our consultants will talk to you, and we'll give you some access to some content that will help you achieve your goal. No obligation. If you meet with us, we'll get you a copy of the Human Sales Factor. With that said, acres of diamonds. I appreciate everybody getting on today. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your time. Appreciate that.